Presentation is about head and neck tumors. Mainly, I am going to cover about lymphomas, sarcomas, neuroblastoma, and thyroid tumors of the head and neck regions. Starting with the lymphomas, Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma are main lymphomas which we encounter. Hodgkin's disease, it shows a bimodal distribution pattern. Peak incidence is seen in adolescents, and next peak incidence is seen in older age group, usually more than 50 years of age. Familiar occurrence is seen in 4.5% of the cases. They are usually seen in impaired immune system patients with a history of exposure to the Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, and herpes simplex virus 6. Pathologically, presence of Reed Steinberg cells are pathognomic in histopathology. The lymph nodes, they also show the presence of reactive lymphocytes, macrophages, plasma cells, fibrostroma, and collagen. Classification-wise, they are classified based on the Ray classification and WSA classification. In Ray's classification divides the Hodgkin disease into nodular sclerosis, mixed cellularity, lymphocyte predominant, and lymphocyte depletion varieties, among which nodular sclerosis is the commonest variety, seen in around 60% of the cases in the adolescents and younger age group children. And lymphocyte predominant is diagnosed early and shows good prognosis. Lymphocyte depletion is usually diagnosed in the advanced stages of disease and shows poor prognosis. Clinical presentation wise, they present with features, most of them present with the features of cervical and supraclavicular lymph nodes enlargement in 80% of the cases. Clinically, they will be firm, rubber in consistency. They can be single or multiple as well. Hepatosplenomegaly indicates the presence of metastatic disease. In case of involvement of the mediastinum, there can be features of compressive symptoms like cough, stridor, dyspnea, and dysphagia. They can also have the features of heterotopic osteoarthropathy due to the excessive deposition of the skin and the bone in the distal limbs. They can also present with the features of SVC syndrome. Retropharyngeal lymphomas can present with the features of acute airway obstruction. 1/3 of the patient, they present with the systemic symptoms, B symptoms like fever, night sweats, weight loss, and fatigue and pruritus. Role of surgery in management of these lymphomas is mainly in biopsy. Diagnosis is mainly based on the biopsy. Role of FNAC is very minimal. Biopsy can be excisional or incisional biopsy. Excisional biopsy is mainly required for the adequate tissue architectural assessment of the tumor. Incisional biopsy is done whenever we are suspecting the damage to the surrounding vital structures. And we go ahead with other laboratory investigations of routine laboratory investigations like CBC, LFT, LDH levels. And these lymphomas spreads to contagious lymph nodes, and distant metastasis to the liver, lung, bone marrow, and central nervous system is also seen. For metastatic workup, we go ahead with the CT scan, head and neck, and chest, abdomen, and pelvis. Gallium-67 scintigraphy is usually done mainly to evaluate the response to the therapy, which usually differentiates between active tumor and the fibrotic lymph nodes. And we do the bone marrow aspirates and biopsy for advanced diseases. Based on all this, we stage the Hodgkin disease into 4 stages by Ann Arbor classification. Management of this Hodgkin disease is mainly by multidisciplinary approach. All of them are sensitive to chemotherapy. Most of them are sensitive to both chemotherapy and radiotherapy. Currently, chemotherapy is used for all the stages of Hodgkin disease. Clinical stage 1 and 2A are well controlled by chemotherapy followed by field radiation. Various regimens have been used. VAMP regimen, OPPA and OEPA regimens with field radiation dosage of usually around 25 to 35 shows a good 5-year survival rate ranging around 99 to 95%. Advanced stages like stage 3B, 3A, and 4 with the symptoms of B symptoms and the mediastinal involvement of greater than 1/3 of the diameter of the chest, we use combination chemotherapy along with the field radiation. The dose of radiation depends on the response to the chemotherapy. In case of advanced disease, we use regimens like MOP and ABVD regimen combination with field radiation, or we can also use OPP and OEP regimen with COPP regimen, which shows a effective event-free survival rate around 88%. Most of these Hodgkin disease show complete remission around 90% of the cases. Factors which predict the poor prognosis are male gender, disease stage around of 2B and 3B, and 4-stage disease with bulky mediastinal disease and WBC count more than 13,500. And after treatment, lifelong close follow-up of the disease has to be done to assess for the recurrent disease and assess for the assessment of long-term effects of the chemotherapy and radiation. Overall, the prognosis of stage 1A and 2A with the 5-year disease-free survival rate is around 99%, and advanced stage have 5-year disease-free survival rate around 95%. Coming to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, the incidence of this is around 30 per million population in children and adolescents. They can be graded histologically into low grade, intermediate grade, and high grade. Majority are high grade in nature. They can be 90%. Most of them are mature B cell lymphomas, and 10% of them can be follicular lymphoma, MALT, or mature T cell lymphomas. In head and neck region, they present with asymptomatic cervical lymphadenopathy around 10% of the cases. They can also involve salivary glands, larynx, sinuses, orbit, and extranodal lymphatic tissues like Walder's-Link. Diagnosis is mainly by open biopsy, and we have to carry out with other ancillary procedures like flow cytometry, immunohistochemical staining, and electron microscopy and molecular genetics as well. Treatment is by chemotherapy. CHOP regimen is commonly used regimen, and radiotherapy is not routinely encoded in non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Disease-free survival is around 80%. Coming to the next commonly seen malignancy in head and neck region is rhabdomyosarcoma. Embryologically, they arise from the mesenchymal cells, which gives rise to striated skeletal muscle. They constitute around 5% of the overall tumors in childhood. 70% of soft tissue sarcomas can be rhabdomyosarcomas. In head and neck region, they constitute around 35% of the cases. Male to female ratio is equal, and they show bimodal occurrence pattern. First peak is seen around 2 to 6 years of age, and second peak can be seen in adolescent age group around 15 to 19 years of age. Younger children, they present with more of head and neck rhabdomyosarcomas. There is 42% incidence rates of orbital rhabdomyosarcomas, usually in the age group between 5 to 9 years. Histologically, they are divided into embryonal, botryoid, and spindle cell varieties and undifferentiated variety. Upon biopsy, the expression of IS expression of actin, myosin, desmin, myoglobin, and MyoD helps in the proper diagnosis of this condition. Myogenin is expressed more often in allular rhabdomyosarcomas. Embryonal rhabdomyosarcoma, they also show features of loss of heterogeneity at the 11p15 locus near to the IGF2 genes. Whenever there is overproduction of IGF2, there will be more stimulation of tumor growth, leading to more spread. Rhabdomyosarcomas are also associated with the PAX3 FKHR translocation, usually seen in allular variety. Presentation-wise, these rhabdomyosarcomas presents with non-tender neck lesions. They can also present with in the regions like orbital region and parameningeal areas in 50% of the cases. Involvement of the scar, parotid region, oral cavity, and pharynx and neck can be seen in around 25% of the cases. Involvement of the orbit can present with the features of proptosis, periorbital edema, ptosis, and ophthalmoplegia. Parameningeal and nasopharyngeal tumors can present with airway obstruction, local pain, chronic sinusitis, and epistaxis. Parameningeal tumors can also present with the features of cranial palsy. Middle ear tumors can present with the features of otitis media, discharge from the ear, and earache. Less than 25% of the cases can be metastatic at the point of diagnosis, and they show less than 10% show lymphatic metastasis. Hematogenous split is in case of 20% of the cases. Diagnosis is mainly by biopsy. Role of surgery in rhabdomyosarcoma is mainly biopsy, and other evaluation techniques are mainly MRI and CT scan of the primary site. MRI carries a superior advantage of evaluation in the evaluation of rhabdomyosarcomas. For metastatic workup, we go ahead with CT scan lung and CT scan abdomen and pelvis, and bone scan and bone marrow biopsies are done for the mainly bony involvement. Parameningeal rhabdomyosarcomas can be worked up with lumbar puncture for the involvement of leptomeningeal metastasis. And we go ahead with the FISH and RT-PCR techniques for molecular and genetic abnormalities. And based on all this, intergroup rhabdomyosarcoma study group classifies rhabdomyosarcomas into 4 stages. And according to study group 4, they are based on the TNM staging, they are also classified into 4 stages. And treatment-wise, combination of chemotherapy and radiotherapy are primarily important, and surgery, role of surgery is very minimal, because as in other types of sarcomas, achievement of the R0 resection with the removal of protecting the vital structure surroundings and the preservation of the cosmetics and functionality of the region involved is very, very important. We can go ahead with complete excision in case of superficial tumors of the scalp, ear and cheek, neck and oropharyngeal region, which are seen in around 25% of the cases. Role of surgery is also there in case of recurrent diseases after repeated chemotherapy and radiotherapy. We can also go ahead with a second look surgery after induction chemotherapy or chemoradiation. Surgical treatment in head and neck rhabdomyosarcoma is very complex because achievement of R0 resection with 1 centimeter tumor-free margin, which usually carries best prognosis, is very difficult to achieve because of involvement of the complex anatomical structures in the head and neck region, which are very difficult to achieve tumor-free surgical margin. And we cannot carry out the surgical procedure which are radical which has the risk of mutilation and loss of functions. So chemotherapy will be the first step, and surgery intervention will be mainly for the biopsy. In case of MS of the parameningeal areas, we involve the multidisciplinary team with the involvement of the neurosurgeons, maxillofacial surgeons, and plastic surgeons. And surgical access should be very wide enough for the good visualization of the tumor and plan for future reconstruction of the tissue defects. And these surgeries usually involve the complications like paralysis of the cranial nerves involved, commonly are trigeminal and facial nerves with compromised motility of the temporomandibular joint and cosmetic defects. Whenever these rhabdomyosarcomas are not surgically resectable, chemotherapy and radiotherapy are the mainstay of treatment. Combinations of vincristine, dactinomycin, cyclophosphamide are currently recommended in by the RMS study groups. And treatment courses are usually carried out for 45 weeks, depending on the clinical stage. Role of opotacan and irinotecan are under trial for resistant tumors and advanced and recurrent diseases of rhabdomyosarcomas. In case of residual or metastatic diseases, radiotherapy has to be added along with the chemotherapy. The radiotherapy has to be initiated after 3 cycles of chemotherapy. Parameningeal tumors and with life-threatening tumors, radiation can be initiated immediately beforehand of the chemotherapy with the radiation dose of 50 gauge with 2 centimeter margin of the normal tissues. In clinical and dose of radiation varies with the clinical group. In group 1 36 and group 2 45 to 40 to 45 gauge, and group 3 50, and orbital RMS carries we give around 45 gauge of radiation. Coming to prognosis, the head and neck tumors, orbital and clinical group overall has a good survival, 5-year survival rate around more than 85%, and other head and neck tumors of rhabdomyosarcomas carry survival rate around 75%. Relapse is seen in 1% of the cases after 5 years of treatment, and recurrent rhabdomyosarcomas are more resistant to chemotherapy. Coming to next common tumors of head and neck region, that is thyroid tumors. They constitute around 3% of all the tumors of pediatric age group, 7% of head and neck tumors. Major incidences is seen in around 10 to 18 years of age group, and more than 10 years of age, more of female preponderance is seen. Less than 10 years of age, more of male incidences are seen. They are usually associated with the RET oncogene rearrangements, mainly radiation-induced thyroid tumors, papillary carcinomas, and medullary carcinoma thyroid. Risk factors are mainly radiation exposure, previous treatment to the childhood malignancies like lymphomas, leukemias, and use of alkylating agents. Histologically, these thyroid tumors are classified into papillary, follicular, medullary carcinoma thyroid, and anaplastic thyroid cancers. Majority of them are constituted by papillary thyroid cancers. Medullary thyroid cancers are usually arise from the parafollicular C cells, which are neural crest origin, and they can be seen sporadically and also familially in incidences with associated MEN2A and MEN2B syndromes. Clinical presentation, these thyroid cancers present with features of thyroid mass at the cervical lymph nodes. Sometimes there can be only adenopathy can be a feature of thyroid malignancy. These lymph nodes can be firm and fixed in nature, and majority of them present with the cervical palpable cervical nodes. They can present with the features of compressions like dysphagia, dyspnea, and hoarseness of voice due to involvement of recurrent laryngeal nerve. Metastases can happen to the regional lymph node, mediastinum, and lungs. Follicular thyroid cancers are less known for local lymph nodal metastases. They are majorly have a bony metastasis. Cervical lymphadenopathy and distant metastasis is usually the first sign in medullary thyroid cancers. Coming to evaluation, sonography of the neck is carried out. USG mainly helps to differentiate between solid and cystic lesions and assessment of the other regional nodal involvement and vascularity of the tumor. Thyroid scan, technetium 99 labeled iodine 131 thyroid scan is carried out mainly to assess for the functioning thyroid tissues involved in the thyroid mass, and based on that we classify them into the hot nodules and cold nodules. 30% of cold nodules can give rise to carcinoma in the later life. The role of FNAC in the assessment of thyromegaly, there is controversy regarding this, along with frozen section biopsies, mainly in management of the follicular lesions. FNAC carries a false negative rate around 1 to 6%. Basically, they have the inability to differentiate between benign from the malignant follicular lesions. FNAC is not mandatory, is not done less than 13 years of age. For them, better to undergo with direct surgical excision. In case of benign lesions, we should follow up the cases with USG and physical examination on the regular basis. In case of suspicious malignant and suspicious malignant lesions, go ahead with surgical resection. Coming to overall management of the solitary thyroid nodule, which are detected by imaging or physical examination. First, we'll go ahead with a thyroid function test. If TSS is suppressed, we'll go ahead with a nuclear study of the thyroid, iodine 131 technetium scan. And if it is showing hyperfunctioning gland, we can go ahead with the surgery. If technetium scan is showing hyperfunctioning, we'll go with the FNAC under sonography guidance. FNAC is showing benign lesions. We repeat the sonography after 6 to 12 months. If the nodules are stable and they are not increasing in size, again go ahead with the repeated follow-up after 1 or 2 years. If the nodules are increasing in size or there is suspicious of malignancy, go ahead with FNAC and carry out surgery as required. If FNAC is inadequate or non-diagnostic, repeat FNAC after 3 to 6 months. If the nodules are and ultrasonography as well. If the nodules are stable and FNAC is benign, repeat the sonography and follow up the child after 6 to 12 months. If the FNAC is suspicious of malignancy, go ahead with surgery. In case of benign lesions, check for the adequacy of thyroid hormone levels in 4 weeks and follow up clinically. In case of differentiated thyroid cancers, total and subtotal thyroidectomy is commonly done. Aggressive resection for the differentiated thyroid cancer is the best surgical management. Total thyroidectomy along with the lymph nodal dissection of the involved regional lymph nodes improves the local control of the tumor, and post-operatively we go ahead with assessment of these tumors after 6 weeks with iodine 131 assessment, radioactive iodine 131 assessment. If it is showing activity, we'll go ahead with therapeutic dose of iodine 131 management. After total thyroidectomy, we will carry out regular follow-up of the patient has to be done with the serum thyroglobulin level in view of monitoring for the tumor recurrence. So basically during surgery, the involvement, the preservation of recurrent laryngeal nerve and preservation of parathyroid glands are important. They are basic concerns. We can use the nerve stimulators, and we have to trace the nerve along its course for the better identification of the nerve and preservation of the nerve. And whenever there is a dilemma about the preservation of the parathyroid gland, we can go ahead with autotransplantation of these glands into the sternocleidomastoid or non-dominant forearms. Management of medullary thyroid cancer in association with the familial Mentu syndrome, we have they go ahead with pre-symptomatic detection of the red associated red proto-oncogenes. If there is presence of red proto-oncogenes, they carry out prophylactic total thyroidectomy within 5 years of life. And in infants who are associated with the MEN2B syndrome due to aggressiveness of tumor, they carry out total thyroidectomy in infancy itself. And the role of external beam radiation and chemotherapy is ineffective. So total thyroidectomy carries importance in case of medullary thyroid cancers. Coming to neuroblastoma, these constitute the third most common malignancy in children and adolescents who are less than 1 year of children less than 1 year of age. They constitute around 4% of the primary head and neck tumors. Most of them are metastatic tumors to the head and neck regions. Infants usually present with tumors in the cervical region. Pathologically, they are arising from the neural crest origin, from the adrenal medulla and sympathetic ganglia. Histological patterns are neuroblastoma, ganglioneuroma, and ganglioneuromas. Detection of chromosomal deletion of 1p with associated amplification of NMIC is found in around 25% of the head and neck neuroblastomas, and assessment of these are helpful for the prognostication, especially this amplification of NMIC and chromosomal 1p deletion with the trisomy 17q carries poor prognosis. Expression of TRKA carries favorable prognosis and good survival. Neuroblastomas present with non-tender neck masses which are firm in nature and usually in the lateral side of the neck. They can also present with features of Horner syndrome with involvement of the sympathetic ganglia. Metastatic neuroblastomas present with the features of proptosis and periorbital ecchymosis. And cervical neuroblastomas, they can also spread to the local lymph nodes and lymph nodal metastases, and they can also show hematogenous spread to the distant sites as well. And diagnosis is mainly by histopathological diagnosis of the tumor by microscopy and bone marrow biopsy for the evidence of metastasis, and estimation of the urinary VMA and HVA levels. And staging is based on the bone marrow biopsy, bone scan, MIBG scans, and MRI of the head and neck region, and CT scan, abdomen and thorax. Based on all this, staging and risk stratification is done based on the International Neuroblastoma Staging System. And role of surgery in neuroblastoma is again the biopsy, and mainly for the tissue diagnosis and stage the tumor, rarely for the resection of the tumor. For localized cervical neuroblastomas, surgical excision may be curative in leading to 95% of the survival. If the complete surgical resection is possible, even if complete resection is possible, in case of intermediate risk and high risk neuroblastomas, neoadjuvant chemotherapy is to be given. Multi-agent chemotherapy is used in the treatment of unresectable diseases and advanced diseases. Common therapeutic regimens are cyclophosphamide, carboplatin and cisplatin, etoposide, and adriamycin. Prognosis wise, infants with the primary tumors of head and neck have overall good prognosis. Recurrent disease is usually widely metastatic and carries poor prognosis. Role of radiation in head and neck neuroblastomas is mainly for the unresectable tumors, tumors which are not responsive to chemotherapy, and tumors which are incompletely resected cervical neuroblastomas. Coming to next malignancy, nasopharyngeal carcinomas. The median age of presentation of these malignancies is around 13 years, more commonly seen in males. Risk factors are Epstein-Barr virus, environmental factors like salted fish, which are high in volatile nitrosamine, can be a risk factor for nasopharyngeal carcinoma. The WHO classifies nasopharyngeal carcinomas into 3 types. Type 1 is keratinizing squamous cell carcinoma. Type 2 is non-keratinizing variety. Type 3 is undifferentiated carcinomas. Most commonly seen is type 3. They also present with painless neck mass. They can mimic the common cold and rhinitis features with features of nasal obstruction. They can present with the features of epistasis, otalgia, and conductive hearing loss. They can invade the base of the skull, leading to involvement of the cranial nerve 6. Other cranial nerve involved are cranial nerve 3, 4, and 5, and 9 and 12. Diagnosis is established by mainly biopsy and other investigations like CT scan, MRI of the primary site, and potentially if there are signs of metastasis, we can go ahead with metastatic workup as well, along with the bone marrow biopsy and bone marrow aspiration. Estimation of the Epstein-Barr virus capsid antigen immunoglobulin level is mainly useful for disease monitoring in nasopharyngeal carcinomas. Treatment is mainly by high dose radiotherapy to the nasopharynx and involved cervical lymph nodes. There is a recent study which has been done for the treatment of nasopharyngeal carcinoma with first-line chemotherapy, which shows a survival rate around 73%. Extensive surgical resection of this nasopharyngeal carcinoma, such as maxillary swing procedure, is not usually applicable in case of children due to extensive skeletal deformity and surgical morbidity associated with these malignancies. Overall, the role of surgical management in the management of head and neck tumors of the children is mainly for the biopsy and establishment of the diagnosis, mainly in neuroblastomas and rhabdomyosarcomas. And role of surgery in thyroid malignancy is carries more of importance, especially in medullary thyroid cancers and papillary and follicular thyroid varieties. Thank you, sir.
which is well presented. I'm saying no, but I think since Dr. Shankar is also there, I think he gave. See, it is very out of it and get all the same.
Sir, little bit disturbance is there, sir, in audio.
Okay, one second. Discussion submitted on my phone. Okay, Vinay. Senior Vinay.
Sir.
Yeah, you can continue. I will put my remarks at the end. Please go ahead. Moderate the session. Hello, Vinay. Okay. Okay, I think they have some. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Audible.
Okay. Okay. Till I think Vinay gets his act together, I thought I will share my thoughts. Dr. Srimurthy sir had a very, very valid point. In the sense, you have made a full comprehensive presentation without leaving anything. But at the end of it all, the retention is going to be very little because you don't see the clinical application directly. So it is fine with me so far because this is what we are presenting. From tomorrow, I think tomorrow Vinay is presenting on thoracic tumors.
Yes, sir.
Vinay, let Vinay talk to me. I will guide you. What you do is from tomorrow, put a case and then discuss about the case and then talk about the relevant. Then it will be much more better. For example, in the case of head and neck, if you put about a case of a differential diagnosis of a neck mass, we have had almost all the cases that you talked about. Some may or may not be there. And then if you branch off from there, I think it will be more practical and more retentive. We will give an experiment. I will give a surefire thought about this for what Dr. Srimurthy sir suggested from tomorrow. Okay. But today it is fine. Let's go carry on with it. As far as Achyut is concerned, what I was looking for is rather than trying to enlist everything, because most of the things what you talked about neuroblastoma or nasopharyngeal carcinoma is a repetition. You would be happier to talk if you had said what is it in the head and neck that we are talking separately about. In what way head and neck neuroblastoma is different from the rest? In what way head and neck rhabdomyosarcoma is different from the rest? Either presentation wise, behavior wise, management wise, then it would make a sense. Otherwise, it's just a sense of completion. You know what I'm saying? Please understand, I'm not trying to put you down.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The purpose of making this was so that you will remember that there are special situations where you require a special attention. That's all it was meant for. All right.
Yes, sir. Yes,
I'm
sir.
opening the host for discussion. Srimurthy sir, you're hearing to me. We will definitely put what you suggested, sir. Now the house is open for discussion, please. Vinay Maximus.
Hello, sir.
Please carry on.
I agree with you. I think he got confused with the topic itself.
Okay.
Basically, if you had said that what he wanted,
correct. My mistake.
Prepared it, then he was planning to just highlight all the cases that are there with the head and neck.
Okay. I'm sorry. It is my mistake because I didn't clarify with people. Maybe I will start doing from now on. Apart from the moderator, I will also put in a little. Okay, not a problem. Sure. I'm not putting him down. He has done a good presentation, wide presentation. It's difficult, but he's done a good job. So let us discuss about what he presented before we go other way, off tangent. Okay. Thank you, Vinay. Please, Vinay, continue to moderate about what he presented.
Achyut?
Sir.
Are there any recommendations of how to handle a thyroid nodule in our children?
Sir, mainly the indication for surgery in solitary thyroid nodule is the presence of thyroid nodule.
No, I saw the chart that you had presented.
Yes, sir.
In doubtful cases, wait for 3 to 6 months. You know why that 3 to 6 months and all waiting period came in thyroid nodule? There are few papers which says that any child less than 13 years with a thyroid nodule should undergo excision.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the reason being, it is very difficult to differentiate on a technetium scan or an ultrasound. Technetium scan, it might be hot or it might be cold, but still you cannot make out malignancy.
Yes, sir.
And ultrasound also, it's not like exactly being extrapolated like adults. So there
Yes,
are
sir.
papers which says that any child which is less than 13 years with a solitary thyroid nodule should undergo excision, because how much is the percentage of thyroid nodule being malignancy?
Percentage.
Percentage of thyroid nodule being malignant. Hello?
Sir, 10 to 15%, sir.
It can range up to 25%.
Yes, sir.
So it's very difficult in children to pinpoint. If it is benign, it's okay, but if it is indeterminate, then better to undergo excision rather than wait. These are few surgical guidelines. I don't know what the medical. Dr. Pooja, are you there?
Till Puja comes, Vinay, I wanted to put my thoughts. See, thyroid nodule in a child, again, will it form the same thing about whether it is a cold nodule or a hot nodule? One. Number two, is the nodule solitary? Even though we call it a solitary nodule, it may actually be part of a multinodular goiter, which is evolving.
True, sir.
Okay, because I've got in fact, Dr. Raghupathi's one case I've got, what actually presented a solitary nodule about 6 months back with follow-up, we could see that there are two nodules, one is hot and one is cold.
Yes.
Okay, so obviously the TSH regulations is going to be stimulating the cold nodule and maybe suppressing the hot nodule. It's difficult. So it's going to be uniform level of thyroid which is coming. So I think over a period of time, most of the solitary nodules actually become multinodular. Is my
Yes.
opinion.
True, sir. Except that if there is a 5-year-old child presenting with a solitary nodule,
Okay.
so then few recommendations are, as it is around 25% are malignant,
Okay.
better to excise those nodules.
Okay. I agree.
Because even technetium, there can be secreting nodules which will produce like thyrotoxicosis, but still there might be secreting tumors, sir. So difficult to differentiate. And in children, they think that FNAC might not be as adequate because the child should be sedated before doing a proper FNAC, and
Okay.
that FNAC should be ultrasound guided.
Thank you very much for a good surgeon-friendly advice. Well, next time Raghupati sends a case, I can convince him with this. Okay. Pooja and others?
Yes, sir. So, like Vinay sir said, sir, like in a thyroid nodule or solitary nodule which is present, almost about 20% can represent a malignant lesion. So, initial investigations, whatever Achyut said, definitely. And like I really don't know as to how significant an FNAC would be in detecting, but there are certain ultrasound features which can tell you whether you are dealing with a malignant lesion or not, which is indistinct margins. If the thyroid nodule has an indistinct margin, if there are microcalcifications which are present, and if there is variable echogenicity. So all of these features point towards a malignant lesion. That is number one. Like sir said, the sensitivity of FNAC
Come back,
might not
Pooja.
be.
I'm sorry. Come back. I just missed out on ultrasound features suggestive of malignancy. Come back.
So indistinct margins, sir, on
Okay.
ultrasound, presence of
Okay.
microcalcifications, and variable echogenicity on ultrasound.
Okay.
These
Okay.
suggest that it could be a malignancy, number one. Like sir said, the sensitivity of FNAC may not be very good in distinguishing benign and malignant nodules, mainly because data is limited. We don't have
Okay.
extensive data in this aspect. If it's clearly indicating a malignancy, I think we go ahead with surgery. But the problem is when it is inconclusive.
Okay.
So even I was under the impression that FNAC is repeated after some time to confirm the diagnosis, but in some cases they suggest that you can go ahead with a surgery after discussing with the parents. So this is something I think which is debatable, but
Okay.
more or less this is the gist of it, sir, that I
Okay.
could give from my side.
Just to continue the discussion, in fact, I want to input from Vinay, Ramchandra sir, and Srimurthy sir, because in olden days we used to say a solitary nodule or a multinodular nodule, it is to do what we used to call as a subtotal thyroidectomy. But for a malignancy, you need to do a near total thyroidectomy. I mean, what are the current recommendations? Have they changed? Because I was quite a few people say you need to do near total thyroidectomy for all. So I just want to know what the current concepts are. Ramchandra sir and Srimurthy sir and Vinay, surgically.
For malignancy, it is total thyroidectomy with preservation of the nerve and the parathyroid gland. It's a recommendation now.
Yes, sir. But like Pooja and Vinay suggested, they're saying the higher incidence of malignancy in FNAC is not conclusive. So when you go inside thinking it is a solitary nodule or a part of a multinodular goiter, so what I'm suggesting is it because the intent of excision, should it be through a subtotal thyroidectomy because there's a possibility of malignancy, or a subtotal thyroidectomy will be doing in considering the risk of
You can
damage
always stage
and
it.
then go
You
back?
can
Okay.
you can do a excision, wait for
Okay.
a report, and go in for a completion thyroidectomy.
Fantastic. Fantastic. You answered my question.
Other thing, I have seen very few nodules in thyroid, and most of the
Okay, sir.
nodules I have seen are fourth arch branchial fistula. It isn't
Okay,
as
sir.
a thyroid abscess.
Abscess. Okay.
So, and mostly on the left side.
Okay.
So, in my experience, it is more of papillary carcinoma of the thyroid, which I have
Okay.
seen. And
Okay,
most
sir.
of them end up with a total thyroidectomy.
Okay, sir. We are lucky because we are associated with Dr. Rupati. So every year I see at least 3 or 4 thyroid nodules and thyroid cases from Dr. Rupati, either in Sagar or in institute. So that's why we are in a way sort of skewed population, not the right one. Srimurthy sir, any
Other thing I have
suggestions?
seen is what is called as a disharmonogenic goiter, which is very
Yes,
common
sir.
in
Okay.
children, for
Yes,
which
sir.
all that is required is a
TSH
replacement of
replacement.
thyroxine from them.
Yes, sir. Yes. Yes. Srimurthy sir, your concept of thyroid malignancies and tumors and nodules in children.
Generally, with the thyroid situations of papillary carcinoma, wherever we had done in the early stage conservative thyroidectomy, that is hemithyroidectomy, you've had problems of recurrence
Yes,
in
sir.
lymph nodes. Many of them manifest with lymph nodes more
Okay,
than the
sir.
thyroid nodule. Biopsy
Okay.
of it showed thyroid carcinoma, so we ended up doing hemithyroidectomy and clearance. Subsequently realized that we do require total thyroidectomy. Our fear was that
Yes,
of
sir.
creating hypoparathyroidism and recurrent laryngeal nerve injury. That's
Okay.
the reason where
Okay.
we unscientifically did hemithyroidectomy and lymph node dissection.
Okay.
Subsequently, we found recurrences, and then we had to resort to total thyroidectomy, taking a chance, because it's not easy to identify the parathyroid in children as you see sometimes in adults. Even in adults, it's not that easy.
Okay.
But we do take a chance. We do take a chance, and then hopefully the incidence of total parathyroidectomy along with thyroidectomy is very low, even
Okay.
though we don't recognize it. Even if you try to recognize it, there's no way of identifying.
Okay, sir.
Luckily, serendipitously, we do a total thyroidectomy. We leave the parathyroids. Recurrent laryngeal nerves are not difficult to identify.
Okay.
Not difficult to identify. So I think the emphasis must be on total thyroidectomy. In
Okay,
the
sir.
medullary carcinoma, obviously, you will have to do a total thyroidectomy. And it is best that a complete thyroidectomy is done in the first sitting itself.
Excellent. Sir, now since we're talking about thyroidectomy and most of the surgeons are listening, because of you and Dr. Ramchandra sir's vast experience, I'll be happy if you can give us some technical tips to identify and preserve recurrent laryngeal nerve as well as parathyroid gland during surgery. I want input from both of you.
Recurrent laryngeal nerve is not an issue. It is,
Yes, sir.
if you look for it, it is there.
I know, but any specific tips, sir? Like, for example, I remember your tips about identifying facial nerve during parathyroidectomy.
Yeah.
That the stylus is actually pointing. Is there any tips and tricks here?
With the use of your magnification, which you are using +3 magnification,
Yes, sir.
recurrent laryngeal nerve many times are covered by a fascia covering the trachea and the esophagus.
Okay.
Thin layer of you really look into it, go through the fascia, see the nerve, only to
Okay.
identify. So the posterior limit of the thyroid dissection can be limited.
Okay, sir.
There are rare instances of direct laryngeal nerve without recurrence. That means it doesn't go loop around
Okay.
the direct
Okay.
branch, which is less than 1%. I have not come across it. I've done a lot of thyroids.
Yes, sir.
And I've come across it. Maybe I have missed it.
Okay.
I don't know. But
Okay,
I
sir.
do look for recurrent laryngeal nerve function post-operatively.
Yes, sir.
Only one patient with retrosternal extension of thyroid, large thyroid gland,
Okay, sir.
There was injury to the recurrent laryngeal nerve. Otherwise, I have fortuitously I have spared the recurrent laryngeal nerve, not out of intention but accidentally. I have spared it. Okay. Accidentally.
Very humble, sir. Your humility is striking, sir.
Ignorance, I have spared it rather than out of intention.
We appreciate your humility, sir.
Yeah.
Dr. Ramchandra, sir, your suggestions about tips and tricks for parathyroid as well as recurrent laryngeal nerve, sir.
Sir, meeting will end in 3 minutes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Generally, you follow the guidelines which are there in adult surgery itself. So inferior
Okay,
thyroid
sir.
artery is the guide, and as Dr. Srimurthy sir has told, the tracheoesophageal groove is where the nerve will be. So
Okay.
you don't go too far posteriorly, you will be safe.
Okay.
And the thyroid, parathyroid gland, usually you can identify them by the change in color, which is normally very, very characteristic.
Okay. Little yellowish color. Yellowish hue.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
Yes. Sorry, Vinay Maximus, you can take over. I just sort of hijacked the discussion. Sorry about it. Vinay Maximus? Yadav.
Sir, the question to Ramchandra sir. Some of the adult surgeons say it's better not to see the recurrent laryngeal nerve. If the recurrent laryngeal nerve you didn't see it, that means it's safe. Is it that good thing? Or,
Yeah, that is one.
Basically different.
That is one teaching. That's one teaching.
But not missing is different. Not seeing is different from missing it.
Yeah. But
No,
better to
sir.
use nerve stimulator, which is freely available now in most hospitals.
Sir, incidentally, if you stimulate the recurrent laryngeal nerve, what will be the response, sir? How will you identify, sir?
The contraction will be made out by the anesthetist. They have that
Okay, sir.
the machine which tells them
Okay,
about
sir.
the contraction.
Okay, sir. Okay, good. I didn't know about
No,
it.
so they have that endotracheal tube which has the processors, in the sense
Okay.
that receptors,
Okay.
so which can stimulate, which can take that electrical stimulation and the movement of the cards through endotracheal tube.
Okay. Oh, Narendra, I didn't realize that you are around. So, Narendra, in fact, I want to also tell us about your experience of parathyroidectomy. I have not done one. I think you have done at least 2 in the institute. Can you just tell us about parathyroidectomy too? Hello?
What we have seen is actually parathyroid nodules, basically.
Okay. Okay.
So they are actually big. So they are palpable. And then only thing we have evaluated for that, and then it's easily identifiable. Sir. Once you ligate the middle thyroid artery, middle thyroid vein, and reflect the lobe, and usually you'll be seeing that brownish colored nodule, which is typical of parathyroid. And in fact, when we are doing that parathyroidectomy, you could identify the normal parathyroid also. It's a very small brownish tissue just posterior to the lobe. In one patient, we did not identify the parathyroid immediately because it was, even though it's palpable, it was quite low. So we have to go a little more down towards that the pre-sternal space.
Other things, no, that you talked about.
Covered like all of the topics extensively, but like you said, maybe if he could have highlighted on the management of rhabdomyosarcoma, neuroblastoma, nasopharyngeal carcinoma in particular. These are the ones that we commonly see. Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's was anyways discussed in details. The other thing is, what is unique about these head and neck tumors? Like I asked yesterday also, neonatal tumors, why do we discuss them differently? So Dr. Achyut, what do you think makes these tumors unique or different? The head and neck tumors, and what are the challenges in managing them? And additional features which you think might need mention.
Regarding chemotherapy, toxicity of the chemotherapy.
Not regarding chemotherapy, but in general as a whole, like diagnosis, management.
Why are the groups separately, and why have we asked you to present separately? Because most of them are already covered. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
The reason why we club together, that there is something special about this. About the presentation, human behavior, management wise. For example, since it is a neck, yeah, tell me. That's what I'm asking.
Tumor behavior wise, rhabdomyosarcomas, head and neck rhabdomyosarcomas, and neuroblastomas, they show good prognosis, sir. And
and what is the reason why they show better prognosis?
We had discussed this.
Because they present early, sir.
They present early.
Exactly.
That's the most important. Okay, neck lesions present early as compared to abdominal markers, so the prognosis is better. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Other thing is like what we practically experience, sir. My
Yes.
voice is echoing, I can hear.
No problems.
Yeah, what we practically experience, especially the tumors which are concentrated around the orbit and the nasal cavity, is that diagnosis, even the diagnostic biopsy, is a difficult thing to do. So it requires a multimodality approach. Like most of the times, the ENT surgeon or the pediatric surgeon are involved. So diagnosis itself, like usually takes some time to establish. That is number one. The second thing is most of them are unresectable to begin with. Like in RMS, as we know, the level of resection determines the prognosis. So most of them are unresectable to begin with. Usually we give chemotherapy and then we decide about going ahead with surgery, and achieving an R0 resection is difficult. So most of the time the modality for local control would be radiotherapy. I'm mentioning RMS. The third
Yes.
thing is, sir, reconstructive surgery. Most of the surgeries are disfiguring, and the role of the plastic surgeon is important in these children, because the loss of aesthesis is a very important thing even to the parents. Sometimes they don't want to get treated because we tell them that it can cause disfiguring, and sometimes half of the face might be affected. So the role of reconstructive surgeries is important. And the fourth thing is the long-term side effects. Even if you were to use radiotherapy for local control in these children, the long-term side effects in terms of cataracts, hearing loss, because most of the vital glandular structures like the pituitary, the eyes, the ears are located in this region. The long-term side effects that these children experience are quite a few. So these are the four things, that sort of make these tumors a little different or quite different from the other tumors in the body.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So I just have a point to make.
Please.
So among all the tumors in the head and neck, maybe two tumors have been missed, and they require a mention. One is esthesioneuroblastoma and the other is salivary gland tumors. We do see these tumors and they are not extremely rare. We have come across quite a few cases of esthesioneuroblastoma and some salivary gland tumors. Maybe it would just be a good exercise to write out differential diagnosis for neck mass, cheek mass, jaw mass, nasal mass, preauricular mass, postauricular mass, scalp mass. And these are the masses, sir. So if we make a list of what the different tumors could be, if the mass is seen in these regions, we may not miss tumors like esthesioneuroblastoma and salivary gland tumors.
Lovely. I think we discussed about salivary gland tumors last time, Jyoti. As far as esthesioblastoma, let me plead my ignorance and my laziness to look up. So why don't you just briefly tell us what it means? At least tell me.
So esthesioneuroblastoma, though its origin is neuroectodermal, sir, like neuroblastoma, it has nothing to do with neuroblastoma. It's an entirely different tumor, and it usually presents at the nasal bridge. So these children come with a classically present with widening of the nasal bridge and nasal and paranasal symptoms, loss of sense of smell, altered voice. And this can cause, if it progresses, it can have intracranial extension and it can cause orbital extension, which will be detrimental in terms of outcomes, because even surgically it may not be resectable. Treatment modality again is multimodal: surgery, radiotherapy, and chemotherapy. Surgery is required, but only margins are often positive because of the position of the tumor. And radiotherapy, these children usually present at a young age. So radiotherapy people usually, they will hesitate to give radiotherapy at that area because it's so close to the eye and because of the age. But whenever possible, yes, radiotherapy is indicated. There is a peculiar staging system for esthesioneuroblastoma depending on the extent and involvement of local structures. And chemotherapy is similar to what we use for RMS or neuroblastoma, the same chemotherapeutic agents, but a different protocol.
Excellent. Well summed up. My only question is about diagnosis. I mean, you do it by, how you get a tissue diagnosis? By means of FNAC or?
FNAC, sir. FNAC. Yes, sir.
Lovely. Thank you. You have answered. You made my job easier. Thank you. It was very succinct.
The thing
Thank
which
you,
I
sir.
was,
Yeah,
the thing
please.
which I was talking about difficulty in the diagnostic biopsy, sir, it is specifically these two esthesioneuroblastoma which we had seen, which had just presented with widening of the nasal bridge, and just to get a biopsy in these children, we had to consult the ENT and other departments like neurosurgery because it's very difficult to obtain the tissue for diagnosis.
Yeah, that's what was my worry was.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
okay, okay. Vinay Maximus, if you have Jodhav, sorry, don't feel bad. Vinay Jadhav, if you have anything to talk, or you can wind up.
Sir is not there, sir.
Okay, okay.
Ramesh, two lymph nodal conditions which we need to keep in mind
Yes,
are
sir, please.
Kikuchi syndrome and infectious mononucleosis.
Okay,
These are
sir.
the two things which we need to keep in mind, often confused with the malignancy.
Very
And
true, sir.
of course, we forgot to mention about Burkitt's lymphoma being one of the common head and neck lesions which we see in India.
Okay, sir.
So Kikuchi syndrome is Kikuchi's disease is one which we
Yes.
commonly see with large lymph nodes and which are often confused with lymphomas. And very often we end up doing biopsy, and the pathologist will later tell us that it is just a Kikuchi disease.
And
Similarly, infectious mononucleosis is often confused with lymphoma.
yes, sir. And my practical experience of Kikuchi disease is, if you find extensive fibrosis at the time of biopsy, generally it is a Kikuchi disease, because I find that a lot of fibrosis around it. So, but is Kikuchi disease identified by FNAC or TrueCut or something?
They should be able to diagnose it, because it is basically necrotic node which is there in that.
Yes, sir. Yes.
But these nodes are very large. Kikuchi nodes are very large.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very large.